And I would like to integrate some way for the laborers out there to really get a hands-on experience of what these systems are. It's just not a huge resource in Ghana. To be able to grab some of that information and instill that in some of the younger workforce in Ghana specifically, but other countries as well, I think is awesome. That's what I'm going to try to be doing. I'm sure I'll be putting a lot of my effort into that.
Welcome to the Passive House podcast, brought to you by Passive House Accelerator, a catalyst for zero carbon building. For news, inspiration, and connections from all flavours of Passive House, check out passivehouseaccelerator.com. Sign up to receive regular updates about events, get your questions answered, and contribute to the community dialogue. There's loads of free information for experienced professionals and people just starting out on their Passive House journey. We hope to see you at one of our weekly Passive House Accelerator live webinars. In the meantime, here's this week's Passive House podcast.
G'day and welcome back to the Passive House podcast. I'm Matthew Cutler-Welsh, coming to you from Tamaki Makaurau, Auckland in New Zealand.
And I'm Zack Semke, coming to you from Seattle, Washington. And Happy New Year, Matthew.
Yes, by the time this comes out, by the time you're listening to this, it will be 2024. So Happy New Year. Looking forward to a good one.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
All right. Well, we're going to jump straight into a fantastic conversation that you had with a guest that you caught up with in Houston late last year. I'm really excited to bring that conversation. But before we do that, let's thank some of our supporters.
Yes, absolutely. So a big thank you to our founding sponsors, 475 High Performance Building Supply, Ingui Architecture, Glavel, Minitaire, Partel, Rockwool North America, Stocorp, and Zola Windows. Thanks too to our champion sponsors, Bewizo, Gradient, Icon Windows and Doors, Intelligent Membranes, PH Air Seal, Proseco, and Source 2050. And a big thank you to our stakeholder partner, NYSERDA, the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority.
Great. Well, tell us a little bit about Sarah Nuamah.
Yeah, well, I first met Sarah at a Passive House Northwest one-day conference about embodying carbon in Portland, Oregon, several months ago, and then had the chance to catch up with her again at FIASCon in Houston, and just was really had a great conversation with her. So I was really excited to follow up more recently for this interview. Sarah is, as we'll say, talked about in the interview, is a board member of Passive House Northwest. She also is a system design and service agent at Small Planet Supply, which is based just out of Olympia, Washington. So it was a really fun conversation. It feels like a really great way to kick off the new year. And so I hope everyone enjoys it. Well, I have Sarah Nuamah here joining for the Passive House podcast. Sarah, it's really great to have you here.
Thank you. It's awesome to be here.
Yeah. So I'm really excited about this conversation. We have had lots of folks on the podcast who are more like mid-career, late career, but you are earlier in your career. Thinking back in the old days when I was in that place, that can be both exciting and frustrating, I know, but you're at a great place now. You're at Small Planet Supply?
I am. Yep. I'm with Small Planet, an awesome team. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. In Olympia. So right? Is that where you live? Yeah.
Yeah. I live in Portland, but they are based out of Tumwater. So right south of Olympia.
Great. Great. I'm in Seattle and spent many, many years in Portland. So
yep. It's an interesting place.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. Well, both of our cities have been kind of going through some hard patches recently, but yeah. So I would love to hear about like what brought you to where you're at now. Like what did you study? I know you're also on the Passive House Northwest board, right? And so kind of, I guess, so clearly there's this real interest in Passive House and the built environment. So yeah, totally. What's your story?
Yeah, I, found myself here in a very interesting and unique way. It's probably a little bit different than a whole lot of other people in the industry. I went to school in two different places. I started my undergraduate degree in Washington, D.C. at the George Washington University. Didn't quite know what I wanted to do even. So I ended up finishing my degree at the University of Southern California in Los Angeles. And I graduated with a communications degree. That's a little bit more on the comm theory side, which is kind of just what informs marketing practices. It's a little more psychological. But I, growing up, they tell you to kind of chase what you're good at, when you're in schooling. And when you hear that you are in school, so you're kind of thinking, what am I good at in school? Or what am I good at on the side that's like pretty obviously maybe a money maker? I, at the time, was good at writing and whatnot. So that's kind of what I followed. I didn't have any real idea of what to do with that career wise, other than, like communications, okay, marketing, I guess. And I just, at the end of the day, I knew what I wanted to do should probably be oriented towards doing something good. I wanted to do something inspiring, something that would help people. Didn't really know what that looked like in the communication world. A lot of advertising and marketing was a little too manipulative, I think, for me. So I really was trying to figure out at least what industry could I apply that towards, right? So the sustainability movements of a lot of companies, especially some of the bigger corporations with their ESG goals and whatnot, is what I thought that I wanted to chase. And that's kind of where I started. And then I moved to Portland, and this place is just pretty awesome. And it's full of people that are really willing to take risks and just experiment for the sake of it. And this is a very kind of, quote unquote, green forward city. So I'm like, oh, perfect. This is a place I can find some type of avenue to get into this quote unquote green industry. And so I found myself an internship. It was geared towards BIPOC people and people of color that can be exposed to what the green industry is. Tell anybody, your neighbor on the street, say green industry, and they think installing solar panels. So of course I'm quite small. People can't necessarily see me through this, but I'm a small young woman. So I didn't quite think climbing up on a roof to install solar panels was going to be my forte, but I wanted to know what else was in this industry. And I got exposed to so many different things. You've got farming, you have pipelines and hydro power and whatnot. And so obviously the renewables are kind of there, but there's also that little subtle heavy hitter, which is the built environment. And I was kind of sold once I learned some of that stuff. And so that's kind of how I pivoted into this industry. But contextually, I have quite the passion for homes in general. I just kind of grew up being fascinated by even the idea of the home. It's kind of like a nest that you get to kind of decorate and really make your own. We moved all over the place all the time. So I was never really that upset about it because it felt like I got to experience different nest creations, if you will. So I got to really start thinking quite early, why is this one so different than the one we came from before? Why, what features are different about this house than the one we just came from? Why does this one feel better than the other one, even though the furnishings and the people are the same? So I think without me knowing it, those little seeds were already kind of planted in my head. So it's been an interesting journey to get here. And I've had a lot of interesting contextual experience that has lent me here. I think I'll let you take the reins just after I kind of little anecdotally give some information about New Mexico, where I grew up most of the time. An amazing state. It's very old. So I got to, I was fortunate enough to be able to grow up all over that state, starting out in the Navajo Nation and kind of moving up north and progressively north, and was exposed to very historic land. And so I got to be around all of the adobe, getting to see ancient buildings that still stand and are still functional. That's the crazy thing. And, New Mexico is one of the oldest places in America that was discovered by some conquistadors. So we have buildings that are from the 1600s that are still in use. And, some of it's built out of adobe, so maybe it's been reinforced, but that structure is still there. It's still standing. It's still serving the purposes it needs to. And I was just always kind of enthralled by that and just by adobe in general. It's so structurally sound, and it's been used by, ancient cultures from so long ago. It's been used by Indigenous Americans and by Africans even. And so I think that's what really piqued my curiosity just in buildings. And my dad, who's the African one in my family, my dad is from Ghana. He lived in Seattle. So I was constantly kind of going back and forth between Seattle and New Mexico. And on one hand, I'm with the mud huts in New Mexico or whatnot, the adobe buildings. And then I go to Seattle and I'm like, well, these are built differently. This is a lot of wood over here. So you're just faced with different land, different resources, different knowledge, But that's kind of a lot. But a lot of my past is
definitely
going that way. Yeah.
Right. One of the things that I've been becoming more aware of in this space of buildings and climate action and also following kind of some of the communication that's coming from Architecture 2030 right now when they're at COP, but not just Architecture 2030. I think it's just because I know folks from there, so that I'm getting exposed to this is this greater awareness of the role that traditional architecture, the vernacular architecture and indigenous knowledge in general, but specifically in our space and around buildings can play in helping to move decarbonization forward. And, I think that passive houses is so much about the technology of creating, airtight, comfortable buildings with very small mechanical systems and all that. And so it's a little bit like conventionally a little bit disconnected from that other truth. And I think it's be really interesting to see how those things can come. And I know that they're practitioners who are exploring that, but how can they come together moving forward?
Absolutely. And it's fascinating because you have, and again, I'm quite obviously taking New Mexico as an example here, but you have these structures that have been here for who knows how long that are even still standing, but those are kind of like the original passive house. They're utilizing passive strategies from, who knows how long, but it's really quite interesting because you're using the same ideas of high thermal mass walls and orientation, maximizing or minimizing the solar gain, and even ventilation. It's almost like we're relearning and yet putting that information into today's world. It's like a intuitive knowledge to a degree, but we're just applying it to modern context. It's quite fascinating to me. And I think once I started looking at it that way and really considering that, I was even more blown away, because otherwise, maybe I'll talk to my mom or something about passive house and just, net zero building and any of this. And it kind of goes right over her head because she's thinking about it in a ultra modern way. We have invented the wheel. And so now we have to figure out a little bit more about how this wheel works. And I'm kind of on the other side of the fence, like, no, not really. The wheel has been there. We're just kind of reorienting it or just putting it in a different direction, but it's there. We're just building upon it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Another thing that this brings up in my mind, there's that I feel like we kind of went down a very carbon intensive and energy wasting route in buildings and architecture during the mid-century mm-hmm. modern movement and like all sorts of really beautiful architecture that just basically dispensed with any concern about the performance of the envelope or anything. Right. And so basically we were really, really, and it was all also combined with the modernist focus on, mechanisms and machines and all that. And so we ended up with buildings with massive mechanical systems and, right. and tremendous waste in terms of energy and carbon pollution and all that. And so the interesting thing, I think, is that how do we then, while passive house has technology in it, right? It is and it kind of is. I mean, any building approach is ultimately a technology. Mm-hmm. But it's not dispensing of mechanical equipment, but it's just figuring out how to combine these worlds and bring the mechanical systems to be very, very small, mm-hmm. to do things like HRVs, which are at their core also passive mm-hmm. in terms of the way that the thermal energy is transferred. So it's I think you were just describing that kind of like there's the two sides of one coin, or maybe there's this middle path that we could find, yeah, perhaps.
Absolutely. Yeah, because a lot of these historic buildings, a lot of them are pretty sophisticated, you know, at some point in time or at some point in however they were constructed could be quite sophisticated. So we're at that point where we're kind of figuring out how the home and buildings generally are their own biome. And so I think it's like really, we're pushing for how we can modernize, how we can integrate whatever systems to really control that biome and make it intentional, right? Not just controlling it for the sake of it, but controlling it to get something specific out of it. And yet are tiptoeing on that line of like, when is it too much? How can we simplify and still get that same result, or at least something similar that we're willing to work with? Human beings we're funny creatures. We're not really that willing to bend what we want to happen, what we want to see, what we want to feel. We're not that willing to sacrifice our comfort. So I think like it's just an interesting time to see how we navigate that tightrope and how we are able to integrate some of these really meaningful systems and whatnot, and yet not go overboard and be able to be really conscious of the carbon output that we're contributing to when integrating a lot of these systems. And we don't really need all of it. You know, it's cool to have some type of, every light in your home can activate when you say your magic words or walk in the door or whatever. It's cool, but I think we got to figure out just how to kind of reel it in, you know.
Mm-hmm. You know. You mentioned that your dad is from Ghana, and I know that when you and I bumped into each other in Houston at the VSCon event, you were talking about some properties that you had some dreams about. Could you share a little bit about that and maybe
Absolutely.
How it connects to some of these themes that you're bringing up?
Sure. Man, let's see. So my dad is from Ghana. Half of my family is there. He lives there now. So I go back and forth when I can. And I guess to rewind a little bit, I have been pretty interested in how passive house can be applied to some hotter climates. A lot of the times, and this could be just because of where we are, a lot of the conversations are about heating and how to kind of tackle that and use some strategies to help with keeping warm in the winter, right? That's a very Pacific Northwest thing. They're just now starting to be like, oh my God, the summers are so hot. We should think about cooling. So originally I was thinking about heating with passive house strategies for New Mexico. Actually, that we still have our property there. And I was just kind of milling over how some of the cooling techniques would be passive instead of necessarily just focusing on the heating. And then I got really into some random little rabbit hole about even hotter places like Ghana. In Ghana, there's not really a lot of temperature swing between the night and the day. We don't really have a cold and hot climate. I call it the hot and hotter climates and time of year. It's really just whether it's dry or cool or wet, but there's not really temperature swing. So I was just kind of thinking about how that would work in that kind of context. And I just got into such a rabbit hole. And this wasn't even when land came into my mind. This was literally just research based for me personally. And I love research. So often late at night, I'm just like literally just looking up some weird things and trying to read some weird research papers. If you were to open my laptop right now, you'd probably be like, what is this girl doing during her free time? But so then I had the opportunity with several other family members to acquire some land, and it's not super hard, but it's not the easiest thing to do in Ghana. And I'm sure other African countries are similar. You can't just really go online and search like land developer. You need to go through the chiefs of those regions. They're who are the ones that can distribute the land. They might distribute some land out to the developing company, in which case you can buy it through them. But it's a little too easy in this day and age to get scammed into thinking you bought land through a developer who actually had no right to sell that land anyway. So I had the opportunity to acquire some land with some other family. We've gotten a huge amount of land and we have just been dividing it up. So I have about 4 plots of land, and it's up in the mountainous region right outside of Accra in our capital city in Ghana. So of course that had me thinking like, well, you know, if the universe is giving me an opportunity for some land and I'm out here really already contemplating how to do these kind of building practices in Ghana, it seems too good of an opportunity. I feel like a fool if I don't take it up. So I have acquired some land in Ghana. I am a landowner. I am happy to say.
So cool. How big are the plots?
The plots are, I would have to really look up how much all 4 of them are together. Each plot is about 70 by 100 feet. So it's not, we don't go by like the acres. It's more just like actual plot size. But then I have the 4 kind of right next to each other. So I guess we could say like 140 by 200 feet. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's great because the land itself is right in an area where the soil, if I were to be interested in rammed earth, like I am, I love rammed earth. It's close to adobe as I can get, I guess. That is the soil type that you would want. So it's a pretty amazing site. And I am excited to get started with some of these passive strategies in Ghana. And I hope, fingers crossed, to be able to make it a FIAS certified project.
Very cool.
We will see. Yeah.
Yeah. That is super cool. So, and are you thinking like single family structures or
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
It would be single family. And I have some connections out there, some friends of mine who are basically in the built environment, in the industry out there. They actually already have the goals to start integrating some more net zero practices into their buildings. So I'm getting them on board. My dreams here are to be able to get them FIAS certified in some way, and or at least some training to just know the ins and outs of what passive house is really about, as opposed to just kind of general net zero. And then I have some great connections out there. I'm really hoping to, at the risk of sounding like I'm contributing to some of the white savior complex, as is often happens with talking about developing countries, I kind of have a dream of being able to establish some more energy efficiency building practices and environmentally conscious building practices in Ghana, because it's really a place that could benefit from these things. And, this is unlike America, but not dissimilar to a lot of other countries. Ghana has blackouts because their grid is just not able to sustain the amount of people that are on it at all times and whatnot. So they have sometimes scheduled, sometimes not scheduled blackouts and whatnot. So just talk about the perfect place to be able to utilize some of these strategies. And hopefully, in my sake, with my plots, I can kind of try to build like a little microgrid, maybe a little solar farm or something like that. But to not have to live in the fear of that would be awesome.
Right. Mm-hmm. That is so exciting.
Yeah.
So are there, as you've been thinking about the potential of doing going all the way and doing FIAS certified projects, what are some of the maybe obstacles or learnings that you're having as you're thinking about applying that in Ghana?
Yeah, great question. The first is that I am located in Portland. So the first thing is that it's
on the other side of the world.
Yeah, it's probably a little easier if I had more time to be able to go there more frequently. So that's the first and probably recurring obstacle that I'll be facing with this. The second is that Ghana is and this is again a lot of similar countries and places, especially along the equator. It's a country that uses a lot of cement and concrete in their building. And so that's something I want to move away from, just because I know what the carbon emissions coming out of that is like. And again, rammed earth is right there. It's using local soil. It is more, vapor resistant than concrete is. It's a little bit more structurally sound than concrete is. I can go on and on. I love it so much. It's more beautiful than concrete. So trying to build without the focus of concrete is going to be an interesting obstacle that I'll see what that's like when we get there, I guess. But then also being able to find the expertise that can utilize, rammed earth and or other ways of building is probably going to be one of my major challenges. And then on top of that, I personally I'm aware of embodied carbon. I don't want to have to kind of just bust the bank on transportation of materials and or, all the different things that can kind of contribute to ways that the embodied carbon footprint is quite high. So those are still some things I'm trying to work out just mentally.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. Well, the ramped earth piece, that would make such a massive contribution to solving for embodied carbon.
Absolutely. Yeah. Oh man, I'm excited about it.
Yeah, that's so good.
Part of really what I want to do there, and there are a couple of groups, it's not as prominent as I would like, but I'm all about instant gratification. I would like there to be a few more building groups and laborers there that are able to have the opportunity to be trained on some of these other things from other countries. We don't often have the resources in country to be able to like learn about how, advanced framing is. That's probably not really something they do out there, but things like that, like those techniques are not just readily available out there. So I would like to, and it probably will, I just need some time. I would like to integrate some trainings, some practices, some way for some of the laborers out there to really get a hands-on experience of what these systems are, what these different types of practices are, some of these strategies that are just probably no-brainers to some builders out in America who have been doing it for a long time, or even people in Germany and Scandinavia who have a lot more exposure to Passive House specifically. It's just not a huge resource in Ghana. So that's something I would love to bring. I would love to partner with some people, especially this, demographic in the labor field out here in America, at least is older. So people are retiring out. To be able to grab some of that information and instill that in some of the younger workforce in Ghana specifically, but other countries as well, I think is awesome. That's what I'm going to try to be doing. I'm sure I'll be putting a lot of my effort into that. Yeah, I'm excited. I'm an excited individual generally. And so I'm kind of always trying to pull people into my little excitement bubble. And I'm very much that type of person that's like, oh, well, why not? Why not?
Right.
And people are like, oh, yeah. Why not? I don't know. Yeah, we'll jump in with
Let's
her
go
on
to
this.
try.
Yeah, exactly.
Definitely.
Oh man. Yeah.
That's a good place to be. Well, that's super, super cool. That's inspiring. So how about the Passive House Northwest Board and like what are you hoping to, what change are you hoping to make, or tell me about your role there?
Yeah, I first of all, super honored and very thrilled to have been nominated to serve on the board of Passive House Northwest. It kind of came out of the blue to me when I was called about the nomination, and I'm like, oh my gosh, yes, but are you sure this is the right Sarah? I was a little skeptical that they, somehow were mistaking me for somebody. Yeah, super honored. So I just, would like to obviously thank them a lot. It's the perfect way for me to be exposed to what's going on in this industry, who some of the heavy hitters are and why. And the awesome thing about that, I think, is that when you really take the time to listen to or talk to anybody who's considered quote unquote like a heavy hitter, and it doesn't even have to be someone that everybody knows. It's just somebody who's really putting their all into their efforts in this industry. They're inspired. Like that's what's really driving a lot of the people to be quite enthralled by them. And I think it's awesome. I hope to emanate that as well. But it's people who are really working out of their own personal passions and motivations. And they're making decisions for themselves, their companies, their local areas, whatnot. They're making decisions that are fueled by passion, curiosity, motivation. And that's why they're felt so deeply, I think, by other people. So being able to be on this board, it's like immediate exposure to people like that. And then it's also people who are very much like myself who are kind of on that why not train. And so we're trying to, COVID obviously kind of had an impact on this board, and they used to do some more frequent conferences, I think some bigger conferences, and maybe some more frequent events. So we're trying to get back into that space a little bit more. It's obviously nothing is ever really going to look like how it did pre-COVID, but things are, more intentional this time around. And this is a group of people that is so excited to start integrating some more small events and some again, very why not attitude events. And it's just like, hey, we have a lot of people that are now getting more and more interested in Zender HRVs, for example, but not a whole lot of people in the workforce really know how to install them. Let's have some type of training where everyone gets together and they watch it install. It's just very oh yeah. Oh, why didn't we think of that? Yeah, right. Of course, let's do that. So for me to be around people that are so action oriented that way is amazing. That is actually kind of that's probably what shaped me a little bit as a person. Just New Mexico is a great place. People are just not very action oriented. And that kind of got to me growing up. So that's why I moved out to DC to start college. I needed some action orientation and some people that are a little bit more solution oriented. And the PNW is amazing for that as well. Again, people are not afraid to take risks out here and to just experiment for the sake of trying it out. So to be with people in the professional world who are also like that is insane. And I'm so grateful that I'm able to have this opportunity. I know not a whole lot of people do, and I'm just over here like, wow, it's amazing over here. The water's warm.
Yeah, I know a lot of those folks. They're good. They're really, really good and inspiring people.
They
Definitely.
are.
It's a good community to
Absolutely.
be part of.
It's like my favorite bunch of nerds,
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Yeah, and I'm at an early enough point in my career. I think that's kind of what contributed to my shock of even getting that phone call. Sometimes I have to grapple with imposter syndrome. Sometimes I'm like, oh my gosh, am I really worthy to be at this table? I don't know. I'm still asking kind of like some dumb questions sometimes. And I have been floored by the response to that of everyone else around me, which is just like, girl, stop.
Yeah,
you are so worthy at this seat. We want you here. We made your plate already. Like, please sit down. So I'm hoping it's my curiosity that's in the childlike wonder that I'm constantly bringing to people. Hopefully that's what got me in that door. But.
Well, you're also clearly like a systems thinker. You're making all these connections and stuff, and we need more of that in all of our work. It's
sweet. I'm glad I forced my way through here then.
Yeah, totally. So, and you're at Small Planet Supply, and people who are based in the Northwest probably are really familiar and doing, green building work in general. Certainly Passive House are familiar with Small Planet Supply, but could you say a few words about who they are and what you're doing there?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So Small Planet Supply is a distributor, I suppose. We have a lot of these high-end technologies that people are kind of integrating into their builds, a lot of them being custom builds. And we carry the things like ERVs, HRVs, some heat pump water heaters, thermocork. So really cool materials and really intentional and thoughtful, products that are in this industry for a reason, not just for the sake of profit, but really to help out with people's building practices and whatnot, but also to kind of help the planet thereafter, right? It's using a little less energy, and it's really intentional that way. People definitely are aware of Small Planet. It's great. You can kind of just name drop in someone somewhere. It's like, oh yeah, I know Small Planet. So I am a system design and servicing agent. That's my title with Small Planet. I am basically commissioning HRVs and ERVs. So I'm going into these homes. Most of the time they're custom build, not all the time, but I'm going into these homes and I'm setting up that HRV or the ERV and making sure that it's giving the balanced ventilation. So it's bringing in as much fresh air as it's extracting out of your home. I'm super happy to be in this role because it's so new from what I was doing. Before I was with Small Planet, I was working on energy performance scores with Energy Trust of Oregon with residential single family homes. So that was a lot of reviewing home modeling data and just kind of making sure things are obviously like above code and compliant with code, and looking at how the whole home works as a system in terms of its energy performance, its energy consumption, and whatnot. So I was able to take kind of a bigger mindset, a bigger picture frame of mind about how the whole home works and what's all contributing to its energy use. And then now I'm able to kind of apply that to a very specific system and a specific, branch of the home. So it's right. Really cool. And it's something that kind of pushed me out of my comfort zone. And just as a person, I like to be out of my comfort zone. And I think it took me years and years to get there. I don't think I really liked that until I was in my later 20s. But I like being out of my comfort zone a little bit because of the fact that it gives you the exposure you would never, ever receive from anywhere else. So I was at a very, desk job, just desk centric, very heavy on the modeling data and whatnot. And that's great. I loved my work. And then I took this job with Small Planet, and I'm now out in the field and I'm out on these job sites and I'm talking to contractors. I'm talking to homeowners directly. I'm teaching them how to use their system. I'm, helping them understand what the importance of air quality is. So many people don't really know about air quality. And it's like, why would you, I guess, if you don't have to, or if you're just never really thinking about it. But man, talk about the silent elephant in the room of your health. Yeah. So it's great to be able to kind of jump into a role that's just so focused on being there in person. It's kind of like I get to remember the home modeling things, but now I get to see it in action. And I'm just so thankful. It's a really cool job. I get to travel all over the Northwest. Again, I'm talking to homeowners and just letting people know what's up with their home, how the lungs of their home are working, the fact that their home had lungs to begin with.
Yeah, right.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Well, it
Yeah.
seems like you're in a really good place.
I'm
That's
enjoying
awesome. Yeah.
I'm enjoying
Yeah.
it. It's a learning curve. I'm definitely, you can ask any of my friends and family members. If something goes wrong with some type of system and it's not working, I am not the one people come to. That they're like, hey, my thing is glitching. Oh my goodness, no. But now I'm learning how to
Yeah.
work with that. It's helping me expand my knowledge. I'm just, again, I have like an insatiable curiosity. So for me to be able to learn all the ins and outs of things is pretty cool.
Yeah, definitely. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this has been really fun, Sarah, and I really appreciate that you've carved out some time to share your story a little bit with us. And
Totally.
Before we close up, is there anything else you'd like to add or anything else you'd like to share?
Yes. I think that it's important that people my age, I consider myself like a baby millennial. It just because my birth year, I guess, is like the cutoff depending on who you ask if it's millennial
right on
or
the
not.
cusp.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Or sometimes zillennial is what I'll say. But I think it's important to engage people in my age range. And I know some people are trying, you've got some workforce development things, and that's great. We are a very curious and excited bunch. I think sometimes that gets overlooked because of the fact that, if you don't really have exposure to some of the young millennials or older Gen Z people, you might be just getting that from the, movie and TVs and from social media. And that's always dramatized. So we have kind of a massive stereotype put on us, like every generation does, but it's skewed a little bit towards maybe being a little bit more lazy and uncaring. And that's just so far from the truth. This is a group of people that is like actively curious, asking why. They're questioning why things are even put into place. We are able to see the faults in so many systems. And so I think it's like an extremely important demographic and generation of people to engage on the level of dismantling what's not working and thinking of different solutions, different out of the box things. Again, we question everything. So might as well use that. It can be annoying. Might as well use it to your advantage, right? Like, yeah, so I love to do some of the workforce things. I love talking to people. Just again, like I had no idea what all was in this industry until I intentionally took a internship that was geared specifically towards that, because they know that we don't have any idea what's going on. So I'm trying to kind of really, really actively crack that egg and let people know like what all there is here. I've talked to so many people in high school and college, and I'm like, hey guys, you can have a desk job if you want. That's like in the built environment. Like you can do marketing in this. You can do X, Y, and Z. It is a little bit hard. This was my experience, and a lot of people that I know's experience. It's hard to break into this industry. I hope it's getting better. A lot of the job applications are entry level, but they require like 5 years of experience or this and that technical degree. And if you're looking for work and you're looking at entry level, where are you getting the 5 years of experience? Where are you getting that? If you didn't have the degree, you're just kind of screwed. And that's how I felt. I could not get an interview even. And so it was just trying to get through that barrier. That was quite the challenge. So, this message is kind of twofold. One, it's for people who are struggling to get in there. Not everyone wants to hear this, but networking is insanely, insanely helpful because a lot of people are looking for help in work. It's just trying to find the connecting piece, right? So sometimes that networking is really the goal. So my, message to you in that case is like, just really keep trying. If you need to, find me on LinkedIn and I'll try to help or something. And then the message goes the other way too, to the people recruiting for work. Like, let's really have a conversation about what we're expecting about entry level work and how to even get people into this field on an entry basis, because what's going on right now is not working. I will tell you right now, it is. That's why there's so many workforce development talks, right? Because they're not seeing the applications. People are not applying because it's such a hard threshold. So it's a little bit of a circle, kind of wonky circular pattern there, but we're all ready to help each other out. It's just trying to figure out really how to do that.
And that was Sarah Nuamah from Small Planet Supply. Really enjoyed that interview. Thank you, Zack. Any highlights from you?
Well, I mean, isn't she awesome?
Yeah, she's awesome.
Yeah, one of those smart, talented people who could have some interesting kind of career pivots. She's probably can be good at whatever she does. And it was so fun to talk about all sorts of stuff with her, including this connection to vernacular architecture, local natural based materials, her dreams about her property in Ghana. And yeah, it was really fun. What did you think?
Yeah, a little bundle of energy, really
Yes.
positive energy, and
Yeah.
just really passionate about so many things. Gosh, where do I start? She had some great lines in there. I really like the concept of not reinventing the wheel, but reorienting it. And I think that's so true. I mean, I often talk about the danger of innovation, particularly here in this part of the world, where in some aspects of many aspects of our building, we're very far behind the rest of the world. And we love to think of ourselves in New Zealand as innovative. And I always caution the people in the building industry about innovation, because I said, look, before you innovate, before you invent something, please just have a look at what's going on everywhere else in the world, because you may well find that your idea is not necessarily a new one. It might need to be, and that's why I really like this concept of reorienting. You know, we might be able to apply warm roofs or triple glazed windows or windows that are in line with the wall, and we might need to redesign some of the flashing details or something to suit our specific materials other materials that we have here, but we don't have to reinvent the whole concept. So that's true for, I think, the details in any particular region, but it's also true for concepts, things like thermal mass in buildings and shading, and using as much of what's available locally and responding to the local environment, but also using the best of modern technology, which is something else that she talked about, which I really like the idea of. Having respect for vernacular architecture and things like Adobe and thermal mass, but also not completely disregarding mechanical systems, but understanding them and valuing them, but not necessarily oversizing them and not just solving all your problems with mechanical services. And I think that was a really good summary she gave of buildings through the last century of how we sort of got, in some ways, lazier and lazier with our thermal design and just tended to throw mechanical systems at buildings to solve all the issues. And you know, we still see that happening today, particularly in the commercial space with big glass box office buildings that are going to have massive air conditioning systems to keep them either warm or cool. And we could do better than that. We could, with an understanding of traditional building concepts, but also incorporating really modern technologies like highly efficient air-to-air heat pumps and other systems like that that can operate very efficiently and very well. So, yeah, some really cool stuff in there.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, as we've been planning the Reimagine Buildings 24 event, March 7th and 8th, by the way, we'll do a little plug about that later. But I've really been thinking a lot about global approaches to building decarbonization and understanding that, you know, passive house plus low embodied carbon and carbon sequestering materials plus electrifying everything plus getting it from clean energy, right? That's kind of the formula that we're thinking about when we think about building decarbonization at the accelerator. And I think broadly in many, like in North America, I would say, in Europe and in New Zealand and Australia, and like it's spreading, right? But it's not the only approach, and I think so. We have at the accelerator, we have this real privilege to be able to be building this global event and kind of telling this story about this global movement. But it's really important to us that it's not a story of like, this is the one solution that it needs to be exported everywhere. Because I think there are elements and kind of basic principles that are really powerful that are embedded in that solution. But there are things that are different about how projects are delivered in different parts of the world. And for example, and different needs around, like, for instance, we're dealing with wildfires, smoke like crazy in the Pacific Northwest. That may not be a driver, like that sort of climate, kind of extreme climate problem is not everywhere. There are different local communities and traditions and climates, and so I mean, the world is just so diverse and varied. So I think it's important for us to bring some humility to, as we're thinking about solution making around the world, around buildings, and learn from local approaches. And so, Sarah's sensibility around that in her approach to her work in Ghana, I think is really instructive. And it is, and that kind of not reinventing the wheel and reorienting. I mean, I do think that there are new pathways that we need to navigate. And what is it that we can learn from that experience of over mechanizing our buildings with the mid-century modern movement and the kind of colossal waste of heat energy that created? What can we learn from that? And I don't know, like, the answer doesn't necessarily have to be that the technology is the problem. But that there's this, I think it's just like there's this middle path, I guess, to borrow a Buddhist phrase. We don't want to go to extremes, and I think there's this middle path that we can discover if we're curious and open, that includes these lessons from vernacular architecture, an emphasis on biogenic materials, local materials, things like rammed earth, as well as, okay, if we then are really smart about using those materials and passive solar strategies and all that to drive down the loads of the building, then just these little, smart pieces of technology can then really deliver the decarbonization and the health and wellness that we're hoping to deliver. So anyway, it's just it's really top of mind for me personally, because I've been just thinking about, okay, we've got this responsibility with this event to be open and not to be kind of like arrogant and exporting answers. And so this conversation with Sarah just came at a really good time for me personally.
Yeah, and I get the sense that Sarah is very empathetic and very sensitive to the interpersonal aspect of that. I can imagine her going back to Ghana and just having conversations with people and not just imposing a Western way of doing things, but actually listening and understanding what are the issues there. Like unscheduled and scheduled blackouts happening all the time. Okay, well, what solutions can Passive House combined with more traditional architecture? How can they build more resilient buildings to overcome that? And I just get the sense that, as well as the technology side, Sarah would be very empathetic and compassionate to the people that she's wanting to help in that place as well.
Yeah, I think you're right.
The other thing that just pick up on really quickly, two other points for me: commissioning of ERVs and HRVs. I'm a really big fan of commissioning because I know that in the residential space, particularly, it doesn't happen enough. We're very used to commercial buildings being commissioned and often have a facilities manager or someone whose sole job is to look after those mechanical systems. But in the residential space, where you've maybe got just a one heat recovery unit or an ERV and a bunch of ducts, so often those just get installed, and they might even get the bulk of that system might get installed pre-lining. The interior gets finished, and who knows who the person is who screws on the diffuser plates on the ceiling. And in a lot of systems, how much you screw those diffuser plates on really impacts the system, because it should be balanced, so you're getting the same combined flow rate of return air and supply air, and making sure that you're getting the supply air to the places you need. And there's actually a little bit of work there to do for the system itself to make sure it's running correctly, but also, really importantly, that the people who are going to operate that building, when it's a home, those are the homeowners, that they know how the system actually works and functions. And that's, I think, a real missing piece in the residential ventilation space at the moment, because we don't have facilities managers in homes. The homeowner is the facility manager. And if they just have this thing that's on the ceiling, they know nothing about it, and maybe there's a panel on the wall somewhere that has some numbers on it, then, how do we know that in 6 months' time whether that thing's going to be working as it should? So, I'm really excited I was excited to hear that Sarah is involved in that commissioning work, and that commissioning of ERB and HRB is a thing, because I think it definitely needs to be a thing, and we need to have more of that. So I think there's a really big opportunity for that, and also taking that time to educate people about the importance of air quality. And then just one final comment, which I also want to pick up on. I know there's so much in this interview, but I really appreciate Sarah's comments about the younger generation of professionals coming through, and appreciating their curiosity and the care that they have, that they're passionate, they want to see things done better, and they are curious about how things work and why things are the way they are. So I think that's really cool to embrace that and encourage that curiosity from our younger professionals that hopefully find Passive House early on in their journey and embrace it.
Yeah, hear. And I think one of the things that's really exciting about VSCon in Houston was how many new faces, how many younger faces were there, and that we do have a whole new generation of folks getting involved in this movement. There was both, like, I think I also was struck by how many of the friends that I've made over the last now over a decade have become kind of like, these wise men and women, who've done a lot of projects now. And
you're not the young guy anymore.
No, and I'm not saying I'm one of the wise ones, but my friends, some of my friends have become that, and so to see both, we're maturing as a movement, I guess. We have that with that kind of original core of people and some really great knowledge there, but then we also have these young, super smart, talented folks who are rising up and understanding the opportunity to make a really important difference in our, for the future of the planet, but also to helping all of us become more resilient to what's coming. So,
well, I think we got another example of that coming up, perhaps next week or soon in the future, with my chat with Stefan and Ryan, whose first experience with Passive House was doing a university project as part of the solar decathlon, and they decided to use Passive House in their winning. Well, I think they ended up coming second, but solar decathlon, that's typically university students, and they're boom right in there. Let's do Passive House as our final university project, and now launching a career straight into it. So really cool to see that.
Yeah, such a cool program. Yeah, that's, I think, impacted so many young professionals. It's really cool.
All right, we're going to do a quick plug for Reimagine.
Yes, let's do. I want to say first that next week is our first program of 2024. So we will be starting up on January 10th with the first episode of the Next Gen series of Passive House Accelerator Live. But yes, the big news that we want to share with everyone and continue to share with everyone and hope that people will spread among your networks is Reimagine Buildings 24 on March 7th and 8th. And here is a quick reel about that event. Imagine you could learn about 24 of the best buildings solving for climate change, instantly become part of a global movement, and gain the knowledge you need to create real change in what you do every day. Join us for a one-of-a-kind, 24-hour, around-the-world, global online happening, Reimagine Buildings 24. We'll circumnavigate the globe, unveiling a new, innovative building project every hour, complete with actionable solution sets, expert insights, and key lessons learned. We'll connect you with peers from around the world and from your region, so you can build the network you need to create buildings that make a difference. We all know that time is of the essence, that climate change is already here, and that today, too many of our buildings are not only making the problem worse, but also leave us vulnerable to climate extremes that are already here. But that's all changing. A global movement is turning it around, reimagining buildings as resilient and healthy havens, as climate solutions. Tradespeople, builders, architects, engineers, developers, policymakers, and just regular people making it happen on the ground on every continent of our beautiful planet. Join that movement at Reimagine Buildings 24. All right, so please join us in March. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's coming up. It's just around the corner.
It is.
Yeah, it's going to be great. So tell
Yes,
everyone
it
about
is.
it. You can find that video on the Reimagine YouTube channel. Please do share it. Let people know that it's coming up, including and especially if they're not part of Passive House community already, because this is much bigger than just us. You know, we want to include lots of people who are interested in providing better buildings around the world. So we really want to get people excited about it and aware of the challenges, but also excited about the opportunities. So please do share that far and wide. I'm looking forward to a great event in March. All right. I think that's it for this week, Zach.
I think so. Thanks a lot, Matthew.
Thanks to everyone for listening, and we'll be back next week on Passive House Podcast.